Hello and welcome. This is Thursday morning in Western Australia, Wednesday night in the USA. Today is week 3 of our 6-week process where we're talking about commercialisation of intellectual property. My name is Daniel O'Connor. I'm the author of this billion-dollar napkin, which is a commercial pathways for intellectual property across multi-jurisdictional environments. For anybody who wants to chase that down, you can. It's available on Amazon, most good bookstores. I'm here to tell you today that we're working through this 6-part series to show you the 6 steps of commercialization. This is a full-on commercial model, and it's not for everybody. It's designed primarily for small businesses, small R&D teams, individual inventors, and people with a product that is commercial, but business to business, not necessarily business to consumer. So if you have something that you ultimately think would be licensed or sold into a hardware store or a supermarket, then this probably isn't for you. I have other programs for that. You'll learn a lot from this, but not necessarily what you want. Now, today is all about funding, and I'm going to go through that. First, I'm going to step my program up to share the screen and give you an idea of exactly where we're going to go with this. Okay, so it's module 3, how to raise up to $2 million. We usually raise between $500,000 and $2 million. And this is all about funding and invention. So if you've got a project, you've run out of money, you're now trying to fund it and you're crashing, this is going to help you today. Okay, so let me start this off with one question. You ready? What if you could secure the funding for your invention in under 100 days from just 4 presentations or less? That would be useful, wouldn't it? We're going to show you how with our 10-4-1 program today. And we use, with the 10-4, we use 10-4-1, 10 qualified prospects, 4 presentations, 1 offer to invest, usually, and all within 100 days. Now, the 100 days is because we have a program, 14-week program called the 100 Days Challenge, and we make you walk through each of those steps. We get you from ideation and modeling, we take you all the way through to getting your project funded. And we pretty much have a guarantee at the end of that. If you don't get funding, then we come in and we'll fund it. We'll get it, we'll raise the money for you, we'll do it. But you have to follow our program, because the whole idea here is this is going to make you independent, self-sufficient. If you can raise capital, you can pretty much do every project you want to do. Okay, so why do you need to know what I know? Well, it's very simple. I'm not new at this. I've been working in this space for around about 30 years throughout the world. I've published many books. You've seen one there. Lots of articles for business owners and inventors. And my latest book, Billion-Dollar Napkin, is, as I mentioned, it's a commercial pathway. It helps inventors who have stalled a project and need that commercial pathway to keep the project moving. And for the past few years, I've also been the Australian member of the UN Task Force for Innovation and Competitiveness. But what I've discovered about capital raising, I learned from investors with access to little or no resources at all. And that's going to be a big key for what you're going to learn here today. So first, some background. I want to show you what the process is. Commercialization is a linear process. It starts with A to B, B to C, C to D. If you skip a step, you're going to have to be dragged back to fix and finish that step. And if you don't, it's going to cost you a lot of money at the end. Alternatively, you're just not going to be able to progress. So be mindful of this. I'm going to give you the steps today, and then we're going to talk about step 3, which is our funding. So there's 6 major roadblocks along the way. That gives you the steps. And those roadblocks pretty much are the introduction to those steps. As you hit those roadblocks, that's when your project gets into trouble. And if you understand what they are and you plan accordingly, then the process becomes months instead of years. And that's what it's all about today. At funding, you should have cleared the first 2 roadblocks. If you haven't, you may have to go back and do those again, at least complete them in some description. Okay, so here's what they look like. These are 6 steps. The big one we're handling today is funding. It is probably for most people the reason why they get onto these programs, to learn about funding. But in fact, funding is just one aspect of it. So I need you to understand that funding is good, but funding, if you haven't fixed the first 2, your funding is not going to be as effective. So let's start with modeling. Modeling is all about ideation and modeling. We get your project up and running by you've understood, yeah, I'm going to get my product. This is what it's going to do. This is how it's going to work. This is how I'm going to build it. These are the team. That's your ideation side of it. The modeling is more taking it to the market. Firstly, who has the problem that you're going to solve? How do they solve it right now? Where do they go to buy the solution? How much would they pay for a solution? How much is it costing them if they don't solve this problem? All of these things you have to know, because that's going to plug your product into a known demand. You can't just build a product and say, oh, people will come to buy it. No, they won't. I've got projects which I showed last week on patenting, where we showed a product that people wouldn't know what it was. It's a great product, but people wouldn't know looking at it exactly what it does. And so without addressing a need and having a market niche, and really that product needed a lot of advertising to get going, it was never going to sell. Okay, so ideation and modeling is, when we do the ideation and modeling, we also look at the exit, because it's important to start with the end in mind. Now, add ownership, and this is ownership and protection. Ownership and protection is all about understanding what I've got, how I can own it, how I can protect it, not necessarily with a patent. If you rush out and get a patent before you know the value of the product or the idea, then you're going to waste a lot of money. And you're also going to push your project into public domain at the end of 12 months, when your provisional patent, which is affordable, becomes due for a patent conversion. And if you can't afford that $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, you're going to be in big trouble. So we show you other ways of getting ownership and protection, defining your ownership and making sure you can protect that. Funding we're going to cover today, so I'll just switch through now to transition. Transition is largely overlooked. A lot of people don't understand how important transition is, and I want to go through that a little bit today. Transitioning is all about, okay, so you've got your money, now we've got to build this product and we've got to sell it, and we've got to start the process of making money out of it. So firstly, you have to have a very clear pathway. You also have to have tasking, all of that mapped out to what are you going to do, how are you going to do it, who's going to do it, what resources do you need to do it, have you got those resources on hand, where are they going to come from, etc., etc. And more importantly, who's going to do it? Because you may be an expert in sciences, chemistry, engineering, medical. Well, it doesn't matter what you're an expert at, but you're probably not an expert in legal, accounting, finance, administration, management, marketing, sales, HR, all of these things that you need expertise in, particularly in a high growth project when you start to commercialize. And if you don't know this and you do want to drive your project, investors are going to be very reluctant to give you money, because they know that you're going to be learning on their dime, and that's not fair on you, not fair on them. So, and if you're going to get this done in months instead of years, you need to be able to engage experts. Temporarily, some of them, I'll show you ways to do it where you actually, technical advisory panels, you don't pay the money. So there's lots of ways to do it, to get experts helping you without you having to go broke again. Next, after that, we've got scaling. When you've got a project that works and you're doing, let's say, $1 to $5 million a year, you now have to look at this and say, is it worth putting some other resources at this project to make it do $1 to $5 million a month? If you can say yes to that, then you've got a scalable project, and we then help you map it all out. We bring in different funding. The first funding we do, today's funding, is all about getting you to scale. Once you've taken it from startup to scale, we then know at that point there, anybody will come in with money, and usually it's venture capital, private equity funds, etc. And they don't look at this as, they may call it a startup, but it's not a startup. What they're looking at is a scale-up project. So you're doing $5 million a year. We think you can do $5 million a month, that we help you. And they don't just bring money in, they bring in a lot of different resources, including contacts. And that's more important than anything else. And I've seen projects, and I use that in our scaling, our transition lessons. I show you an example of how one company did that and scaled up, and the people coming in to scale them actually made several phone calls and got a contract with Boeing, and that company immediately scaled on just one contract. So that can show you how effective it can be. And that company, the private equity fund, was actually with a venture capital fund, exited through IPO. So they actually listed that company, is still listed today on the Australian Stock Exchange. Finally, we have the exit. As I mentioned, we plan that at the beginning. The exit is all about, how do I get out of this project? How am I going to realise my value? It doesn't mean to say you sell. You might do a trade sale and stay on board. You might do franchise it. You might license it. You might grow it out. There's a lot of different options you have. And at that point there, you're going to need other resources to continue. So if you're beyond scaling and now you want to grow it, you might say, well, we've scaled it up to cover the whole of our nation, and now we need to take it global. So how do we do that? We're going to self-fund because we've got good cash flow. Then we're going to grow one branch at a time or two branches at a time, and we're going to get a process to roll this out. We may use franchising, we may not, whatever the product is, whatever it's suitable. But we plan that out with you to make sure you get your exit rolled out. And it could be that you trade sale the project to another company and then take shares in that other company instead of cash, which may put off your tax event for realisation of profits or capital gains. But it also gives you an opportunity to be liquid because you can sell the public listed shares anytime you like on the stock exchange. So there's lots of ways to do it. We show you how to do that. So that's an overview of the first 6 steps, and also now we're going to dive into funding. So today I want to teach you just 3 things. First, how to identify the right investor for you so you don't have to pitch 100 or more times and hope something works differently at least one of those times. Then I want to show you how to stack your leverages and remove the risks so you know the investor will say yes and want to get on board with your project. Leverages and reducing risk, I'm going to show you a lot about that in the second part. The third is I'm going to show you how to avoid all those rookie mistakes that you hear about, so that at the end of this presentation, your 20-minute presentation, you're going to hear a yes, and you'll get to retain that yes, because you won't do business straight away. Nobody signs on the dotted line within minutes. They take days, sometimes weeks, and it's usually about 2.5 to 6 weeks to get the process until you've got cash in the bank. So let's just work through those 3 things. It's all I'm going to teach you today. This module is usually a 3-hour module, and I'm doing this in 30 minutes for you today as a summary. So I'm only touching on a few things. When you do the 3-hour module, we do it in a 2-day workshop, and then we handle all 6 steps in the 2-day workshop. We work on your project. Now that's available for you at a later time, but right now let's focus on what we've got here. So the first part, how to identify the right investor for your project. Now, I want to tell you an interesting story about the 4 critical things I learned from a Burmese investor that changed where and how I get funding. Now, I'm going to switch back to my screen just to go through this with you. So I can tell you a little bit of a story here. In 2016, as part of my UN task force, we were writing a coffee table book called Innovation from Adversity. The process was to be an A3 landscape book with lots of high colour and stories about people who had developed innovation from absolutely nothing and had no access to resources like government, banks, funding, UN funding, any other funding at all. And they had to do all of this themselves, no engineering, some of them literally had dirt hut floors, but were successful. Now, we identified the success as not necessarily being money, not a certain amount of monetary value. What we did is we said, if that individual is able to become self-sufficient for themselves and their family and were becoming benevolent into their community, that was registered as a success. So then we wanted to learn their stories, their trips and tips, and share them with others. That was the whole objective of that book. Now, what we were doing in order that, we set out to interview 88, we ended up doing about 43 inventors from developing countries only. So we looked at developing economies because we felt they are less likely to have access to any resources, and they were working from adversity within an adversity. So when we're doing these, we're sending out people with the language skills, and they were interviewing the people. They would spend a day with them, asking questions, and everyone around them, everyone involved in the project. At the end of that, they take a lot of photos, they send it all back to us. We'd have somebody look at this and say, the photos are good or they're not, and I want more photos and I want something with that, and So the person, while they were there overnight, would then go back the next day, ask the questions that were missing, take the photos that were needed, and then we call it a day. We had that translated, put into English, and then it was up to me to edit those. Now, this particular day, I was in Western Burma in a place called Irrawaddy. Irrawaddy Delta is famous from Cyclone Nagas, if you remember it, lost more people than the tsunami, but very few people heard about it because of the government there. I had done an interview that morning with an interpreter, and we were sitting on a runway. I was actually sitting on my suitcase at the end of a runway in Irrawaddy Delta, waiting for a little single-engine aircraft to come and pick us up, take us back to Yangon or Rangoon. So while we were there, I'm listening to a recording on my phone, which I downloaded several days before from an interview done in Doha, in Bangladesh. And I had just done that interview that morning through an interpreter in Irrawaddy. So I had an idea of the questions and the format, and I'm listening to it. And the response to one question was quite interesting. And it was a question from the person who put the money in. And I started to explore that a little bit because I'd just got the same response from where I was, and it was radically different from what I expected. So when I got back to my hotel room, I started to listen to these different people, cutting through to the investor, if you like, and listening to the questionnaire. And then it started to correlate quite strongly that these people were answering it differently from what I thought. So I shared that with my colleagues, and we decided to do something about it, primarily with my clients, because nobody else wanted to spend the money, and it does take money to do this. I picked a number of clients from Australia, Singapore, USA, and Canada, and I rang them, and some of these were 2 to 3 years old, but most of them were within a year. And we decided to ask them, the inventor, can we speak to the person who put the money in? And most of them said, yeah, no problem, here's the number. And we bring them up, and we asked them just one question. We asked them, what made you jump on board with this project? We didn't say what made you invest in it. We said, what made you jump on board? And there's a reason why we asked that. And the responses correlated very strongly with these responses from developing economies. And that is a shock, because then it meant that we were looking at funding a completely different way. And that's what the big key to what we're doing here with the Cornerstone Investor Model is. I'm going to share that with you today. So I'm going to now share my screen again, and we'll go back to that. And I'm going to go through what those 4 critical things are. Now, these are what they taught me in terms of their responses to some of these questions. Firstly, the definition, how they define themselves. None of these investors saw themselves as investors. They were partners, they were helpers, they were mentors, they were a lot of things, but they weren't investors. That in itself was interesting. Next, very few of them were in it for return on investment. They didn't look at this as, I'm putting $10 in and I'm getting $26 out in 18 months. They didn't have that attitude walking into this. They came in for other reasons, and those reasons are very important. There was a lot of non-cash top-ups. That is, people were saying, well, you may not need, you're going to need, let's say $100, and 50 of that's going to be spent on acquiring the machine. Well, I've got the machine, so I'm going to lend you that machine to do this, and that's going to save you $50. You can give me $40 worth of equity out of that. Therefore, now you only need $60. So it was a good way to mitigate their risk by non-cash top-ups. The fourth was there were very few high net worth individuals. You know, let's say millionaires. We always think of, well, find me a millionaire and I'll get someone to throw money in my project. No, very few of them actually had that profile, and they got in for other reasons. Some selfish reasons, but they got in for those other reasons. I'm going to share that with you today. Now, there was a lot of criteria for jumping into projects, but the most important thing is that the reason why I show top 6 is because number 6 is what you expect it to be. Expect to be number 1, and the rest of them were basically more important. So I could have had top 10, I could have had top 5, but number 6 that I needed to show you, which is return on investment. Now, as a result of that, you need to understand something here. There are 5 more important reasons why people jump into projects with money and other assets in order to make these projects work. Let that sink in. 5 more important reasons. Now, to cut things for you, to change your life completely, I'm going to give you those 5 reasons. Number 4, fairly expected, novelty and protection. Nobody wants to invest in a Me Too project that doesn't have that excitement. They don't want to do it. There are lots of successful Me Too projects, but I think you'll find that novelty and protection, and these guys responded as novelty and protection became important. The next was it had to have an exit plan. If you walked in there and said, we want you to put money in and we're going to all be successful, no, if we're going to get you to put money in and we're going to actually cash you out at this point when we do this, when we're going to bring other people in, or we're going to exit the project, or you can have an opportunity to buy the project yourself. But here's how we're going to value it, and this is why you're going to get money back or whatever the reward is. Next, risks managed. You need to show people that you understand what their risks are and how you're going to manage or mitigate those risks. If you can't do that, if you don't do this well, people will understand you don't understand their business as well as they do, because most of the investors come from within the industry or the market, and they understand those risks far better than your inventor. So in order to put this across to the prospective investor, you need to actually have a good, sizable understanding of the risks and how you're going to mitigate those. Number 2, the commercial model. And I can tell you this much, the money is not in the product. It never is. It's always in the commercial model you wrap around it. Now, I'm going to ruin these shark shows for you forever and a day. If you watch these shows, investors come in, or inventors come in, they present their product to 4 or 5 investors. You think those investors are looking at the product? No, they immediately switched this and said, what commercial model can I use? How will I interface this product to a known market? And that's what they're not sharing with the inventor, because that's where the money is. And they work it through, they know exactly. If you watch one of these Shark Tank shows and you say, okay, that's what the product is. Now, what's the market? How do I interface it to the market? How is it best done? Is it going to be what sort of rollout is it going to be? It's going to be a franchise. It's going to be a trade sale. It's going to be a license. How am I going to do this? And you start working through those models. That's what those sharks are doing. They're not looking at this and saying, well, that's a nice product, or that works well, or that's going to be an improvement. No, it's not about that at all. It's about the commercial model. But the number 1 reason why people jump into these projects, and it doesn't matter what demographic they came from, what geographic they came from, the number 1 reason was leverages. Now, leverages is fairly hard for most people to understand. Instead of trying to explain it, I'm just going to give you an example. Now, this is a fictitious example that I'm going to invent for you, and I'm going to use you, the watcher, the viewer here, as the investor, if you like. Let's assume that I have a machine that does wheel alignments, and it does wheel alignments so well that I can do a wheel alignment for $50, and where you normally, it costs you about $100 to do a wheel alignment, and you charge about $250 for that. Now, if you have a wheel alignment, if you have a tire place or tire outlet, let's say you have 10 tire outlets, each with, 3,000 customers on your books. So those customers are not coming back in every week, they come in every 3 years. But they're out there, you know they're out there, and some of them you lose, they don't come back, and others you know of them, but you've never been able to sell the tires, but they go to other people. So you've got this on a database. I come to you with this machine and I say, okay, let's install one in every one of your 10 branches. Give me $1 million, I'll build them, we'll trial them in your branches, and then off we go. At that point there, you'll buy them at the end of it if I can prove to you that they work, because you've got a hungry herd of people who want or need wheel alignments. And every time you sell them wheel alignments, you're going to sell them tires, because a wheel alignment pretty much says your tires are being worn down unevenly if you haven't got your wheels aligned. So that's where we are with the first of leverages we call reciprocal trade. Now, there's other leverages that will hang off that. Like, for instance, I can say to you, let's do this under an R&D program, and therefore you can have an exclusivity for 12 months. And then after that, you buy these machines for this much, and I use that capital to scale up the project. So another option for another leverage is for me to say, what if I bring you in, and instead of you paying for these 10 machines, you simply pay all the costs associated with buying the parts and building the machines. Therefore, you become what's known as a collaborative research partner. Now, if your jurisdiction allows, your tax jurisdiction allows you to have collaborative research partnerships, you may get a tax deduction, or a tax credit, or an incentive for investing in R&D, because that's what you're doing now. Excuse me. So if you're investing in R&D now, you're going to get, in Australia, we can get up to 46 cents back in the dollar immediately. So that pretty much says that your $1 million is now only $540,000, and you're going to buy these machines, and then you've still got $1 million worth of equity in the company as it goes forward. So it can show you how very quickly this can become huge in terms of the way it works for everybody. Now, let's keep going. Next, I want to show you how to stack your leverages and remove the risk, so you know that investors will say yes and want to get on board. Now, these investors, as I said, they're either from the industry or the market, so they understand everything about it, but you need to show them where the value is. So let me introduce you here to Dr. Kirsty Bayliss. She's a plant bioscientist, and she came up with a concept using cold gas plasma to saturate water so that she could wash produce. And that produce would then, the plasma would basically eliminate it would kill off all pathogens on the surface of that fruit, vegetables, whatever it is. And as a result of that, she could make the fruit last longer. In fact, on her trials in a supermarket for avocados, she got the fruit going from 5 days shelf life in the supermarket to 17 days shelf life in the supermarket. No difference in taste, no difference in nutrition. So it just shows you what can be done with a bit of ingenuity, and she's not affecting the fruit, and she's washing it in water. Cold plasma is not going to do anything to it. So that gives you an idea. What we did then, we said, okay, well, she wanted to rush off to the local supermarket chains and say, I can make your fruit last. But we knew better, because we knew that supermarket chains don't care if the fruit goes off. They do care a little bit, but it's not a cost for them, because they ring up the supplier and say, when you bring out your next lot of fruit, I want you to rotate this out because it's bad now. So you take it back, give me a credit, give me more fruit to replace it. And that's the way it works. If they don't sell it, it goes off. If that goes off, they get replaced for nothing. So what we did is we looked at who in the value chain would get the best benefit from it. We identified that the fruit, as it gets picked, washed, sorted, packed, stored, shipped, stored again, and then displayed. So at all of that, there was a lot of time, but the 5 days at the end was all that the shop cared about. And what we did is we said, we know that the people who have the best, get the best out of it is the pickers, packers, and the processors. Well, we looked at the packers, and we then pitched to them for this project. Didn't mean much. I only needed about $500,000 to get it to the scale-up stage. And so we looked at it and said, how could we approach those? Well, we did, and we got it done really quickly. In fact, on our 10-4-1 model, we actually only approached 2, and the first one we pitched to, and they said yes. The second one pretty much was going to say yes as well. They heard about it and said, look, we want you to come around and show us. We want the opportunity here. We didn't do that. We just put it through, and then the supermarkets. That packer was able to go into supermarkets and say, what if the fruit I give you lasts 3 times as long as the fruit others give you? Is that an advantage to you? Absolutely. Yes, thank you very much. And they were able to negotiate to be a prime contractor instead of a secondary contractor on long-term contracts. So how does this apply to you? Well, let me show you. There's no investor wakes up any morning and decides to invest in any unproven project. It just doesn't happen. They don't think, oh, I've got a spare lazy $1 million sitting around. I want to put it into something that's high risk, with someone I don't know, I've never met before, and I expect to hope to get a return at a time where it happens, where I can't control it, and it's out of the jurisdiction of my people that I've hired to run my money. That's why high net worth investors won't do it. Most inventors pitch what they think the investor wants to hear, all about the money and the returns and the great product. I focus you on things the investor needs to hear. What are the risks? What are the opportunities? What are the, I'm going to show you what those 5 things are at a later time through this. So how does it all work for you? That helps you build your perfect commercial model. It works out an attractive offer. It proves the leverages and the part that the partner's going to get, and shows them how you manage their risks. That's how smart you are on that. And finally, it shows them how you plan their exit. These are your 5 things: model, offer, leverage, risks, and exit. If you cover off those 5 things, people are going to say, okay, this guy understands my business. So let's now go to the third one, which is how to avoid the rookie mistakes so you get a yes at the end of your 20-minute pitch. And we do 20-minute pitches. We don't do 3-hour pitches, 4-hour pitches. And let me tell you the psychology behind it. At 3 minutes, people start to drift. At 12 minutes, they switch off. At 20 minutes, you've lost them completely. You can keep them between 12 and 20 minutes by giving them information that is of interest to them. In some people's cases, kids, you put their name on there, a photo of them. They'll then keep engaging with you. So I believe that's what they do with President Trump, because that's the only way to keep his attention. So it says you a lot about him, I suppose. Now, what we're trying to do is get through that 20-minute pitch and get a yes, and then have that yes sustain itself over the next 2 to 6 weeks, when it takes all that deliberation and getting all the facts together, getting your due diligence file, getting it evaluated, getting the person, their people to understand what it is that they're putting money into, and then off you go. So let's go through some of those. I'm only going to give you top 10, but these are not the top 10 reasons. It's just 10 reasons that I can explain within 1 minute each. So if you rushed out and got a patent or a prototype, that's money you've wasted, because you haven't got a value yet. And until you get a commitment from an investor, you don't need a patent. What you do need is non-disclosure agreements, waiver of rights, confidentiality deeds, and everything else to restrict the trade from anyone who looks at your project, who's invited to look at it. But when you get a patent, we usually do that. We pitch our product without a patent. We have written up the patent application and we show that to them, but we don't lodge it until the day before they put their money in, because that gives us a full 12 months of provisional patent time. And therefore, we've got an opportunity to get your project from start to cash flow positive in 12 months. And that's what that transition is all about, getting there in 12 months. So at 12 months or 11 months and 29 days, I can go into the patent office and lodge that patent, the provisional, the extension of the patent, which is $60,000 or more cost. But at that point there, the company's paying for it. I'm not, the investor's not. Neither of us are running any risk, because the project should have generated sufficient capital to pay for that. And that's what we've provided for in your cash flow. Okay, next, if you've been hunting for wealthy investors, hunting, pitching, hunting and begging, you're probably not getting anywhere. And I can tell you now, and I hope I've explained it enough, wealthy investors aren't your market. We can tell you that if you get a yes from an investor, a high net worth investor, within 2 to 6 weeks, you're going to get a phone call. He's going to say, really good project, love it, don't want to get involved, changed my mind, thank you very much, good luck with it. And the reason for that is not that they've lost their shine or anything else. It's just that other people around them, and any person with any high net worth individual does have people around them to manage their money, their investments, all these things. So accountants, financial controller, financial planner, all these sort of people are around them and having a lot of interest in loose money, if you like. And if you're trying to take $1 million out and put it into your project, that's money off the table for them, and they're going to fight tooth and nail, and they're going to point out the unknowns and the fact that you can't trade these as equities, whereas they could go on to the stock exchange and trade whatever it is and get in, get out if they wanted to. A lot of different reasons, all of them valid, but not necessarily applicable. But as a result, it usually takes about 2 to 6 weeks before you get that inevitable phone call from the high net worth individual saying, change my mind, thank you very much, good luck with it. And you don't want that. If you don't want that phone call, you don't go to high net worth individuals. It will just burn you. Next, a lot of people look for a lot of investors. You know, if I get $10,000 each from 100 people, I'm going to have the money I need, and that's all I need. I can tell you from experience, if you do that, those 100 people give you another role, another hat to wear in your ongoing project, and that hat is investor relations. You become somebody who has to manage these people. And if you have one investor and that person is actively involved in it, in the industry or the market, they're giving you feedback constantly, you're going to want to talk to them. But these individual people, you're not going to want to talk to, because it's going to take one day of your week completely off the table as you answer phone calls. They're not asking how the project's going. They're saying, how's my money? Am I safe? What's going on? And even if they're not safe, if they change their mind, they're going to ask you to find another buyer for their shares. I mean, it's a nightmare. You don't want to get involved in it. Try to keep it down to one. When I've had projects where 2 or 3 friends have got together and said, we will pitch in for this, I generally encourage them to go and get a proprietary company, form that, put their money into that as equity, and then pitch in, roll that money into the project so the company owns it. One person, you can update all of them as one person. So if you talk to one, you don't have to worry about breaking equity rules about pitching to others, or telling one person information and not telling others. So because you're talking to them as one entity. So a whole lot of little things like that really do help you in the long run. Next, did you pitch the invention? A lot of people start to pitch, oh, this is my great idea, it's terrific, it's terrific. They forget that it's all about the commercial model. Don't pitch the invention. If you've done this right, you've already talked about the commercial model. The reason why you got the appointment in the first place is they know about the product. So they don't want to know about the product. They think they do, you think they do, actually they don't. What they want to know about, what they need to know about is how this is going to make money and at what time frame and everything else. I'm going to show you what those key points are. Some inventors go in there and talk about their previous successes and their current other projects. That tells people that you're going to be spending money on, if you've got more than one project going, how do I know you're going to be using the money I give you on my project and the time you're spending on the other projects should be the time that I'm paying for. And there's always going to be that sort of conflict. It doesn't rear its head unless you don't achieve as much as you expected to achieve, or you don't do it in the time frame you expected to do it. Then people start to question, and pretty soon you've got litigation flying back and forward, people putting liens on different projects. And I invested in that because by proxy you develop that on my time, and it's fairly close to what I've got and everything else. So you just keep those off the table. There are ways to diarise your time, but you don't pitch any of the other projects you've got when you go in to present to a prospective investor. Did you put yourself in charge of everything? Remember the transition we talked about, taking all the hats off, putting other people into different projects, into your project with different skill sets? That's more important than ever, because your limited funds, let's say, got $1 million and 600,000 of that is going to be for investment in people. If you spend that with the right people, your project's going to take 6 months and not 6 years, and that people will understand. So you need to be mindful of that going forward full time. Next, have you chased venture capital? We always remember the Americans talking about startups, and this startup got $80 million, that startup got $100 million. They're not startups, they're scale-ups. So understanding the difference, a startup is somebody who has little or no cash flow, and a scale-up is somebody who's doing, let's say, 5 million a year and want to get to 5 million a month. That's it for a modest, small project. So if that were the case and you can do that, that's scaling up. That's the time to talk venture capital. They don't invest in projects, they invest in cash flow. Everything is about cash flow, and they look at it and say, if you've got 5 million coming in and we spend $10 million, we'll know we'll get that to 5 million a month. Therefore, that project is worth it for us. We can also cut your costs back because we know how to do that. And we also can increase your sales because we've got the contacts to do it. Lots of different things that they do. That makes them good value, but it only makes them good value when you're scaling a project. If you go in there and pitch to them about my new startup and your startup hasn't got cash flow or it's got very little cash flow, these people will nod, smile and send you away and say, come back when you meet these 4 criteria. And then, of course, that's basically the number one is cash flow. So save yourself time, don't burn them. There's no point in pitching to them because it's extra risk you've got because these guys are big guys, they're sharks. They might find outs in your non-disclosure agreements and you haven't put your patent in at that time. So we generally wouldn't go to a venture capital company until we've got the patent lodged, and that's after you've started the process. Okay, did you promise millions? We find that one of the big mistakes that inventors use is they go in and start pitching millions and millions of dollars just because they feel they have to be bigger than the last guy or the next guy. That's not the case. It's how realistic your returns are going to be. And if you can, and it doesn't have to be millions and millions of dollars. If you say to the person, you know, a lot of inventors go in and say, well, there's $40 billion worth of this sold around the world and I only want 1% of the market. This is how I'm going to do it. Well, how I'm going to do it is irrelevant because getting 1% of the market that big is probably impossible from a startup. And you need to understand that this is how you're going to build your market. Be more interested from the ground up, not from the sky down. So promising millions doesn't work, but being realistic about how you're going to grow it, double it, double it, double it, that's what people will understand. That represents far less risk for them. How does the investor get out? It's very important you show them a pathway at the beginning. They will not get in if they can't get out. You need to say, this is for 24 months, and it's at that point stage, this is how we're going to trade sell it to that party. We'll get equity in their company because they're a publicly listed company. You'll be given equity. You won't be escrowed on that equity. You'll be able to trade it immediately if you want to, or you can stay on board as we increase the wealth of that particular company by adding our product to it. There's lots of different ways to do it, but you're spelling it out in very clear terms what the investor's going to get. And a lot of investors will turn around and buy out the project themselves. More than 30% of them buy the project themselves because they're in the industry and in the market and they want to be exclusive. That's the way to do it. How long is your pitch? I've mentioned this before. Don't do 3 hours, don't do 4 hours. A lot of companies come out of a 3-hour pitch and get a thanks but no thanks, good luck with it response, and they get contemplative about it and decide I've left off something. So they add that to the pitch. And as a result, they're doing a 4-hour pitch next time and then a 5-hour pitch, and it just will not work. If you can't do it in 20 minutes, you've lost the game. You've lost it completely. At 20 minutes, you should be summing up. There's only 5 things you need to get across. Those 5 things are model, offer, risk, leverage, exit. That's the order that we use, but doesn't necessarily mean the order you should. I've shown you the other 5, the same 5 in a different order prior to this. Model, offer, risk, leverage, exit. And we do that in a 12-point pitch, done in 20 minutes. We generally won't even do Q&A at the end of it. What we do is we say, give me your questions, we'll write them down, and before close of business today, we will deliver you back the responses in writing. So you've got our answers in writing. There can be no doubting or questioning what we're actually saying and stating about it. And we're happy to come back if you've got that. But most cases, I don't drag them into a Q&A, which can drag on for hours. I try and get that as quick and as succinct as possible. Now, I promised to teach you 3 things today: how to identify the right investor for you, how to stack your leverages and remove the risk for the investor, and how to avoid the rookie mistakes that we all make that will turn your yes into a no, or just get you out the door and get you a no later on after people have contemplated it. So how did I do? I hope I did okay for you today. Now, I've set aside some time in the next 48 hours to speak to 15 people only about how they can apply their ideas to your project, how you can apply your ideas starting immediately if you wanted to. Whatever your biggest problem is, I already know how to solve it because I've been doing this for 35 years. Now, who's this for? If you're an independent inventor, if you're a member of a small R&D team, if you're willing to change from the way you've been doing things, and if you're an investor who understands that you need to own this skill for the future, then it's worth talking to me. So 15 slots available. If you can say yes to all this, I'm happy to chat to you for free during a 45-minute strategy call that I'll run between now and Sunday. So if this sounds like you, then here's what you can do next. Schedule a call with me by simply copying the link you can see now and putting it into your browser and booking into my calendar. If you need to, get your camera, take a photograph of that screen so you have it now. 45 minutes, Daniel 45 minutes on Bitly, and that will link you straight to my calendar and you can make the appointment from there. If there's 15 slots, you can get one of those slots. If there's none left, I'm sorry, you can come back in 6 weeks and do this course again and see if you can jump on. So there we are, 45 minutes. Let's do the Q&A if you guys want to do any Q&A. I'm going to now jump back to my screen. So do you have any questions? We're running a little over time here today. So I should be mindful of that. And yes, we're way over time. So what I might do is suggest that we put questions. You can put your questions to me from in writing after this, and I'm happy to publish them onto our Facebook site. And you can then, they will, at the end of this recording, we'll put the questions and the answers, so you can go back in and look at that if you wanted to. But by all means, get me the questions, line them all up, and I'll answer them as a need to be later on. Thank you very much for this. I'm sorry for going over time. I hope it was worth it for you. Okay, bye for now.